I think in reality, the superhero is our new mythology. Instead of gods and demigods and heroes, we have superheroes. And the superhero is the perfect vehicle to tell a variety of stories. Whether you need a godlike figure like Superman, or a mere mortal, flawed person like a Batman, or somewhere in between Spider-Man, who he's a kid with problems just like the kids reading the comic books, but he has these fantastic powers. Whereas Batman has the same physical limitations up to a point that you and I might have, but he just has a big checkbook. And then Superman, someone we cannot, or Wonder Woman, someone we dream to be. But they become these perfect templates for these other stories that we want to tell.
Welcome to Speculative Sandbox, your audio playground for creative storytellers. My name is Vicky Lawn, and each episode, I and a guest will unpack a fiction trope with an eye for character development and narrative structures. Make sure to look for Speculative Sandbox on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter, where you can join the conversation. Leave comments or questions, or let us know what other tropes we should cover. When the real world just doesn't cut it, let's get lost in a fictional one. Hello, everybody. This is Vicky Lawn. I am so excited about this episode today. I sat down with Brad Allis. If some of you may remember him from a previous podcast episode, he talked to me about dystopian societies. He's back. He's talking about superheroes, and there really isn't a better person. He is so passionate about comic books, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the DC movies. I knew he'd be the perfect person to talk to me about this topic. We discuss what makes a superhero, what could possibly date them, since many of them originated in past decades, and how would we design our own superheroes that could take on some modern problems. Brad, I'm really excited to have you back on the podcast. The last time you were with us was on an episode dedicated to dystopian societies, and that is currently the most popular episode to date. How does that make you feel?
Well, my ego wants me to think that it was all me, but I realize that it's probably a little bit of me. A lot of the content of that episode, as well as your adept editing skills to put up those little video shorts that make me sound even better and more compelling. So I'll take 1 out of 3 being me, and that's good enough for my ego.
Awesome. Well, okay. For those who haven't listened to the dystopian episode yet, how about you tell a little bit about yourself for our new viewers and also our repeat viewers?
Sure. My name is Brad Allis. I am currently working much like you in government communications. I have a journalism background. I spent well over almost 20 years as a sports reporter, later transitioned into a community reporter. I also did sports radio and even dabbled a little in television, even though I do have a face made for radio and a voice made for print. I'm an aspiring novelist. I have currently written 2 full manuscripts, which I'm now tweaking, trying to find representation. And I'm about 27,000 words into book 3 of a 2018 book, a detective series that I hope to do. And I just like to consider myself a storyteller. I used to do a web cartoon. So yeah, all over the place, like just telling stories, whether that story is the story of why you need to vote for a certain transportation package, or about a failed hockey playing 20-something-year-old detective, or everything in between.
And you have a big love for comic books, right?
I do. I do not currently collect comic books because I got priced out of the hobby, but from about, 1979 to about 1999, I was a voracious comic book reader. Wanted to be a comic book artist, wanted to be a comic book writer. Wasn't quite good enough as an artist. I'm just good enough to be able to impress people with my doodles, but not so much that I can get anything more than a $10 an illustration gig. I used to want to be a comic book writer so I could later become a novelist. Now I'm hoping to be a novelist. I can transition that into comic book writing, because I do have several scripts and plots, and which I will reference a few of those probably during the show.
What explains the shift in the market for comic books? Why do you consider yourself priced out?
Inflation, cost of printing, better quality printing. Again, even if you go back to when I was in college and I would spend $20 every Friday, you go down to the comic book store. I'd buy my comic books for the week. Then downstairs was a CD store. so I'd buy my CD. So my disposable income went towards basically comic books, music, and beer. And that was usually all on a Friday. But I'd stock up on comics. I, read them in the dorm. But you could get a comic book even then for like buck 50. Now you got $3-4. Now I'll still pick up some of the collected editions when they're good deals. I try to follow the hobby, but they just keep revamping the universe. So now my comic book consumption or my superhero consumption is far more through web comics and more importantly, HBO Max and Disney Plus.
So when you're watching the cinematic universe of these comic book stories, do you feel prepared, or has it changed so much that you're just along for the ride?
I feel prepared, but there are times I have to go, and so much of it is still drawn from the classic stories of the 70s, 80s, 90s. But with like Moon Knight has changed so much. He used to be just Mark Spector, and he was a kind of a Batman knockoff. And now, so I did have to do a little of the, there's a few YouTube recaps I watched to make sure I'm not missing anything. But for a lot of others, yeah, it's pretty easy. It's pretty much like, I know that guy, or watching it with my kids, I'm like, ooh, she's gonna be a bad guy. Just watch. They don't care as much about spoilers. But yeah, so I still have a pretty firm grasp on it, where I don't come off as too big of a Johnny come lately.
So today's episode is dedicated to superheroes, not just the superheroes we all love and know, but I challenged you for this one to come up with modern superheroes for modern day problems. Before we get into that, though, what would you say the purpose of a superhero is when it comes to the overall genre?
I think in reality, the superhero is our new mythology. Instead of gods and demigods and heroes, we have superheroes. And the superhero is the perfect vehicle to tell a variety of stories. Whether you need a godlike figure like Superman, or a mere mortal, flawed person like a Batman, or somewhere in between Spider-Man, who is, the whole point of Spider-Man was he's a kid with problems, just like the kids reading the comic books, but he has these fantastic powers. Whereas Batman has the same physical limitations up to a point that you and I might have, but he just has a big checkbook. And then Superman, someone we cannot, or Wonder Woman, someone we dream to be. But they become these perfect templates for these other stories that we want to tell. So whether it's the everyman, Peter Parker trying to pay rent and then fight Doc Ock, or whether it's and with Superman, it's almost a Christ figure. He fell to Earth to save humanity, which ironically enough, he was created by two Jewish immigrants. But you can tell these fantastical stories, and sometimes it is placing. There's a lot of my favorite Batman stories from the 70s and 80s were putting Batman in the supernatural. So you take this essentially detective with a cool belt, but you put him in this world that he can't identify with. And again, vice versa. You take Superman and you humanize him, or you take, the guy it's a much bigger problem trying to ask Mary Jane out on a date than it is to fight the Sinister Six. So it's a great vehicle for telling these wide variety of stories. And I think later what you saw them being a template to tell different kind of stories. Even though in many ways Superman was the immigrant experience, Wonder Woman was actually created by a male feminist educator. But really in the 70s, you saw a shift in storytelling that was using the superhero as a canvas for more mature storytelling. I think maybe most famously in the 70s, you had the Green Arrow stories where Speedy, the sidekick, became a heroin addict. It dealt with addiction in a way that had never been dealt with in comics. Black Panther, the original comics, he was fighting the Klan. He was fighting the Jim Crow South. More famously, Chris Claremont's run on the X-Men was talking about racism and discrimination. Later, it became a platform for LGBTQ stories, where instead of saying the black guy is getting discriminated with, or the gay kid is getting discriminated with, it's the mutant, the blue mutant with the tail is being, so we could try to relate to, well, that's not fair. Why are they picking on Nightcrawler? Well, in reality, Nightcrawler was substituting for an African-American student, so mutant became this catch-all for racism, and it told these stories very effectively. We also saw the grittifying of superheroes, whether it was, Frank Miller's Dark Knight, which was a criticism of Reagan era America, or The Watchmen, which was a reaction to the Cold War and moral ambiguity that we now see all over. But back then, your heroes were, even Batman was still a good guy who never killed. And, now we see, that, well, gee, guess what? All Batman's villains are mentally ill. When you looked at, I love Claremont's X-Men run. I mean, Magneto was a Holocaust survivor, that which humanized their Darth Vader, for lack of a better word. Wolverine was experimented on by his government. You had what Nightcrawler was a German Catholic who was persecuted by the church. I mean, you had these complex characters, but at the same time, the guy who looks like a demon is fighting the mutant who can control magnetism. But it was done in such a good way, and then that's when it's very successful.
So are there specific conditions that need to exist in a world within the fictional universe for a superhero to be considered an actual superhero? Like what changes it from just writing a story about a police officer or a firefighter?
I think there are certainly those superhero tropes, whether they're the costume, the name, the superpower. But I think the best part of good superhero stories is the ability to stray and break those tropes as well. I mean, Superman is not like Batman, who's not like Spider-Man. Superheroes really can be billionaires, gods, aliens, Amazon princesses. But you could also argue Zorro was a superhero. The Lone Ranger was a superhero. You go back to the pulp era, where I don't think they were even called superheroes, but a guy like, was the Shadow, who was just a costume vigilante, who wore, not even costume, he just wore a trench coat and a thing covering his face. Or Doc Savage, who was this like golden man adventure Indiana Jones type. So I don't think there are any hard fast rules. Maybe, I guess you could best say, maybe it's like, I know a superhero when I see it, but I can't define it.
It seems like, to me, when I was thinking of an answer for this question, it seems like there's always injustice afoot, and the main character is uniquely suited to solve problems that others can't. And one thing I wanted to unpack a little is Bruce Wayne's approach to fixing Gotham. You have a man who will fight in the underbelly of the city as Batman, but then you have a wealthy person, part of the wealthy class. Do you think he's doing enough from both angles?
It honestly depends on which version of Bruce Wayne. And I think Bruce Wayne, to me, it's easy to have a good Batman. It's hard to have a good Bruce Wayne. If I was writing Bruce Wayne, I've actually, I've thought way too much about this, especially the DC heroes, because I want to write them all. My Bruce Wayne would actually, well, first of all, Bruce Wayne would not be a person. It's Batman's the identity. Bruce Wayne is the mask, if you will. But to me, my Bruce Wayne would be more like a Richard Branson type, where everything seems very spur of the moment, but it's actually Batman being very calculated. I didn't like the Christian Bale portrayal where it's all partying with models, and I got to be so anti-good that I come off as I think he should be more, to me, he should be more of a flake, but a flake with a good heart. So let's say he has to go battle Ra's al Ghul in the rainforest. Well, Bruce Wayne's gonna be like, I'm gonna go save the rainforest today. Bye, guys.
Yes, I would love to see Bruce Wayne actually use his wealth for systemic impact.
But in many of the comics he does. There is the Wayne Foundation. There's, I even want to say in the video games, even we saw it a little bit in, that he kept just trying to carry on his father's legacy in some of the movies. But yeah, in many of the comics, Bruce Wayne is very much a philanthropist. Wayne Industries has a philanthropic arm. So we have seen that in some of the versions of the comics. The problem is, much like Commissioner Gordon in the movies sometimes, or sometimes, it's whoever the mayor of Gotham is, the Bruce Wayne has been the most inconsistent version of Batman, I think. And it's, again, if I was doing it, he'd be like a flaky Richard Branson who's like, no, today I am going to solve world hunger. Well, wait, maybe I'll buy Twitter.
Yes.
No,
yes,
actually,
exactly.
I'm going to go to the Arctic just because I want to, because really secretly the Riddler has a base in the Arctic and he needs to get Batman there. But that would be my version.
I feel like that reminds me of the 90s Batman cartoon. I felt like there was a lot of that.
Actually, and I would argue that was one of the best written Batman versions of all time. The animated series was unbelievable.
So then when we look at the challenge for today, which is modern superheroes for modern problems, when we look back on our classic superheroes, what about them may seem dated now?
Again, I think you have to go era by era. Obviously, the golden age was written for children, for small children. Superman fighting aliens and imps, and Batman being tied to a giant penny and rolled down the hill. I think what you get when you get into later, grittier versions where they did try to put it in realism, and Marvel, that was their whole thing. Marvel, Stanley used to joke, you pick up a building in the DC universe and it has a flat bottom. You pick up ours and you see pipes and electric conduit, and but you have to change it with the times, with technology. So I think in many ways, and we see this in the modern superheroes, the secret identity is an outdated concept. Because of social media, because of CRT cameras, because frankly, if you were Spider-Man, somebody at the government or even just private industry could triangulate all the Spider-Man
Oh yeah.
sightings and figure out probably. But if you look at the Marvel universe, the MCU, none of the Avengers have secret identities. Even Hawkeye, who hides his family on a farm, went out to dinner and everyone recognizes him because he didn't wear a costume.
So if you were to be a superhero now, would you just have to relegate yourself to being employed by the government, maybe?
Yeah, or you'd have to be you'd have to be Ollie Queen and be a billionaire. You'd have to be, and I haven't watched The Flash in a while, but I know he had some money backing him through whichever rich inventor, underneath the Star Labs or whatever. But yeah, that's why if you look at all the modern superhero ones, if they do have a secret identity, they let everyone in. In Green Arrow, he had 9 people who knew it. In Flash, he has a team of like 47 people. Spider-Man got outed in the last movie. So I think that is one thing, that has been very difficult. Just the concept of what kind of person would put on, granted, you don't see them wear spandex anymore. They all have armor or padding or cargo pants or, to put it in the real world, because no one would just don a pair of tights and run out there to fight.
Especially if you're visible. Silly. It's like yes. You have to jump through all these hoops. What about in the case of Anonymous, who is not one person, but a mass of hackers that are global wide? I guess you could argue that they are like a modern day superhero, except they're not one person. They're an initiative in a group. And I think one of the things they did was when Russia first started attacking Ukraine, they started dismantling Russian news media sites.
Yeah, and with that though, but you have the anonymity of being behind the keyboard, which is ironically enough, every superhero now seems to have a keyboard warrior on their team.
That's right. Like Barbara Gordon was probably one of the first, right? With Batman.
Barbara Gordon, I think was the first, but then you have what's her name on Felicity on Green Arrow, and you have that whole team of the Star Lab guys, with Vibe and with all of them can hack into a computer, and because it's just and really, if you want to start with that might have started even with like 24, where Jack Bauer, who's not necessarily a traditional superhero, but had Chloe, backing him up and sending him the info to his PDA or PDF or whatever PDA. So I think again that is the adaptation of the time. But I think if you want to look at it's far more realistic to be able to stay anonymous as someone who's behind a keyboard than if I ran out there today and put on body armor and I grabbed a baseball bat and decided to go fight the guy who's trying to rob my Circle K. Well, within an hour, the video footage of the Circle K would be there, and they're like, "We're looking for a 5'6" stocky," and people would be like, "Oh, that looks like Brad."
So, do you think with that technology in hand, though, do you let's say you do have someone back home on the counter or the on the keyboard for you, that the brute strength component is even needed in the modern day?
Again, it depends on the story you're trying to tell. Obviously, if Thanos is attacking, or Doc Ock with those metal arms, yes, you need a brute strength component. But I think, and you have seen this, you can write completely compelling stories where the hero's greatest asset is his mind. And frankly, some of the best Batman stories are where he is the detective rather than the fighter. And I thought the new movie attempted to do that but just really needed an editor. But yeah, some of the best Batman stories. I mean, remember they used to call it Detective Comics. That's where Batman came from. So, and you have other heroes like that. Whether it's the DC has the Question, and Marvel has some guys like that. Even if you look at the Hawkeye limited series, the best part of that was when Hawkeye was trying to discover the information, not when he was shooting his bow. So yes, you can tell very compelling stories without the brute strength aspect. Although again, at the end of the day, most successful superhero, it is a physical combat capability.
I've prepared 2 different types of modern day superheroes. Now, mind you, I am probably the opposite of you. I am not as knowledgeable of comic books. I know what's in the theater runs, and I have a light-hearted obsession with characters, mostly because of I love them and not because of a loyalty to the comic book history, even though I'm definitely I appreciate it. So I prepared 2. How many do you have?
I'll figure it out. I got a bunch because as I think about storytelling, which I do frequently, I come up with ideas of how I'd like to present. And some are already maybe even slightly dated, but yeah, I always try to think of a realistic approach to telling the superhero story.
Okay. All right. How about you start with one? We'll go back.
Okay. So I always wanted to rewrite the Fantastic Four, but this could work for anyone. And my original idea was the Fantastic Four breaks up. And Sue and Richard, who are the married couple with the kid, they go off to be like Indiana Jones type adventurers. He's going to use his scientific mind, and her powers to go, raise.
She's the one that turns invisible
and correct? Has force fields and things.
Okay.
Then the Thing, who was a street who is the brick guy, but he was basically just a guy who grew up in Brooklyn, in the Bronx, and he goes back to find out his neighborhood is taken over by the mob. But the story I really wanted to tell was Johnny Storm, who's the flamboyant Human Torch,
played by Chris Evans, and
later played by what's his name?
The guy from Black Panther.
Yeah, Michael B. Jordan.
Thank you, Michael B. Jordan.
So what would he do? Because he doesn't want to be out of the spotlight. He would reform the Fantastic Four, and how would he do that? On a reality show. It would be American Idol for superheroes.
American Idol for superheroes.
So
I love that.
If you look at the Fantastic Four, there, and a lot of the superhero teams, there's always a type. You have to have a strong man or strong woman. You have to have an energy projector. You hopefully have some kind of mentalist. So basically, he would be looking so the story would be told both looking like a television show and then the behind the scenes with him, and then his conflict as the producers of the show are trying to force he's like, well, no, I need She-Hulk. I know her. She's really good. Well, like, no. She doesn't test well with the market. You need Brute Gal. And of course, villains would be trying to infiltrate. But yeah, I wanted to do where it was Johnny Storm as the Human Torch, but it could be any character, putting together his superhero team, not like Batman did. Because I also love the building of the superhero team. I love that part of the movie. Like, I love that. That was the best part of Justice League. Bruce Wayne, Batman going and finding Aquaman and finding Wonder Woman. But it would be that. So, first Johnny Storm's dropping by to hand them the invitation to come to the Baxter building. And then we follow and then of course they have to have trials and tribulations. And again, there's going to be villains involved. So that would be my thing, how to take our modern, how to become a star in the modern, era, and mix it with a traditional superhero team building story.
That makes me think of when you think of manufactured boy bands and
yes,
the appeal that they have commercially, and how you probably have, like, especially in the case you're talking, a reality show on competitions, you have that one poster child, which is in this case Johnny, and being able to find new talent. And I could picture that now, like, you interview the contestants and they're all so excited and they're trying to bring themselves out of like a life of hardship or whatever, or maybe they had a toxic accident and now they want to share their story.
And then he has to cut the person because, like, he was hideously disfigured, even though he's the most powerful one, because they have to take the more handsome,
Yes. Incorporate the
or
Hollywood issues. Yeah.
or you even have you could be, when they're like, I just don't think you're ready. I don't think you can handle the pressure. And maybe that's it. Like, oh, you have wonderful powers, but you just cried when I asked you, what your superhero name was, because you couldn't so you could play with a lot of those tropes and cliches, but do it as superheroes as opposed to singers or dancers or your other entertainment fields.
Interesting. Okay. My first one I'll talk about is okay, I'll tell you the name. First Lady Justice. And the reason why I came up with First Lady Justice is because when Barack Obama was in office, Michelle Obama worked on a health campaign for schools. And so I saw this in a documentary. I'm going off of memory right now. And she was targeting sugar specifically, trying to reduce sugars in schools. But she angered the sugar or the high fructose corn syrup lobbies. And so even though she had a point, like, how, I don't know if you've ever seen next door, there's a cafe and it goes healthy snacks for healthy schools. And it's ice cream. It's just straight ice cream. So she was working really hard on this fantastic initiative. And then suddenly I think the lobbyists got pissed off that her whole initiative just went away. It just faded away into the distance. And I'm like thinking, when you're the first lady, it's a very unique position. You're not elected in, you're kind of initially back in the old, you're basically a trophy wife. That's how it was. And you have your feel good family initiatives, but you don't have the same influence that you would have if you were an actual elected official, even though you do have a very special platform. And I'd look at things like that with Michelle Obama, where she was powerless to fight these very powerful lobbies for a very important cause. What if she or whatever first lady or first gentleman, is that, I don't know what it would be.
I think it is the first gentleman.
Okay.
Yes.
Either the first lady or the first gentleman would have an alter ego that would then go on like, all right, I'm going to go destroy your sugar factories now under the guise of a shadow or whatever. But at the same time, as the public figure, I'm smiling and I don't look affected, but I'm using my political network to get the information I need to then tear down sugar factories. So there you go. That's what I would.
Or it could even be where they have an agent at their disposal. So it's not necessarily the first lady out there, but she's feeding information to her.
Ooh, yeah.
Her super agent or the person she had the government create for her.
Yes, an entourage.
To get her. Okay. So I like that.
Cool. All right. What's your next one?
Okay. So this is a mixture of two ideas I had. And again, I like to see, I always wanted to do how would the real world react? And when I was a kid, there was even before I used to get the encyclopedias of superheroes. They were called Who's Who in the Marvel universe. I think I forget what DC called it. And I was looking through, and there were some corny superheroes from the 40s. And a lot of them have been revamped and modernized, but one of them was called Mr. Terrific. He has been modernized. And if you watch Green Arrow, he was the kind of the nerdy inventor guy with the T on his, painted the T on his face. But his original one was a guy with like just, red and green costume that said fair play on it. And, as a 13-year-old kid, I'm like, that guy's stupid. But I'm like, but he wouldn't be stupid endorsing products.
Ooh, okay.
Going further, what if Johnson & Johnson or Procter & Gamble or whoever created their own superhero to be their own spokesperson? And he really fought crime.
But did he use their products to solve the crime?
Not necessarily, but, he might be like, Mr. Terrific, you just brought down the mafia. What are you doing? I'm going to go have a Pepsi and a Taco Bell.
I'm going to Disneyland.
And then you could tell a variety of stories where it's actually not one. There's a whole team of them because you can't work 7 days a week. And then some of them are flawed. But then I thought, well, what if you actually had the same concept, but it was government and they had a public facing hero? Think of Captain America, but it's actually, you have the Captain America who shows up and talks to the media and appears on The View and on Fallon, but he's actually not the real superhero.
Okay.
He's the pretty boy. He's Steve Rogers. But really you have this whole team of gritty mercenary superheroes who are doing the dirty work. So it is, again, how you market your superhero to the media, but there's got to be a dark underbelly, and then doesn't necessarily have, but yeah, so that's it. Just how would corporations and the government use the superhero as a marketing tool, as a propaganda tool, as a way to sell product?
I'm surprised that hasn't
So
happened yet.
that was, yeah. And I'm
Like,
sure it has in some regard, but again, that to me that would be very much. And again, it kind of goes along with the because the reality show would have the same thing. Johnny Storm drinking his Coke while he's trying to figure out whether, She-Hulk or Thing Jr. should be the muscle person. But yeah, so I think, again, how would the media react to or product placement with superheroes?
that makes me think of I'm the name of the account is eluding me right now. Kirby Jenner. I think it's called Kirby Jenner. It's this guy that gets photoshopped into or video shopped into all the Kardashian footage as if he was there with them. And they put on this whole thing like he's their long lost cousin or brother, but he doesn't show up on the show. And it looks incredibly realistic. And then it's a fun guy that you follow. You think he's like an influencer or whatever. And then you find out it's actually a marketing agency that runs the entire thing. And they're showing off their capabilities of changing footage to incorporate him in there. And I don't know if he's an actor or he's just employed by the agency, but it makes me think of that, where you have that one person at the front making all the appearances, but you have like a whole agency behind you supporting you. What about taking that one step further, manifesting superhero qualities through, doctoring photos and videos and creating a superhero that isn't real, but we perceive him to be because we're only watching it through our phones? I guess that happening.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. How the heroes doesn't exist.
No, it doesn't exist at all. Maybe they're a deep fake. Maybe they're a person, but it's completely manifested, and you're able to.
There's actually you there always happen to be in a weird place you can't. I just saved the rainforest here. You can't get here, but
yeah.
Or the actual police department has the drug bust, but they give credit to Agent Zero, who again is just some guy in his workshop with a green screen and Photoshop. And
yeah, it's like taking the guy who pretended to be the Mandarin in the Iron Man movie, but he's not a real villain. And so the idea is then you can manipulate their followership. You know how social media is so powerful in the area of endorsement. The person's not even real, but now you can get the followers to do certain things, whether it's to buy a certain product or act a certain way or whatever. Okay. My next one, I guess it's kind of along this route. It's not fully developed because I feel like there's so many what ifs here, but I'm calling them the social media bandit. And it's because I don't know if you've noticed this on social media, but you don't like that wild west of the old days. Internet doesn't exist anymore. You're choked off, you're throttled. It's really hard to get information out there. I want someone to take down the big platforms and restore freedom of access. So this person would probably have a tragic past that fuels them. Maybe a loved one got manipulated by fake news, or they fell for a spam account. We're talking about like fake accounts that like get women to give them money, and they think they're dating, that kind of stuff. And the idea of the Robin Hood effect. So rob from the rich, give to the poor, hack into these systems and give maybe certain activists more of the outreach, like actually let people organically reach their followership and their base without having to pay for it. Influencing the algorithms to expose certain injustices or to promote certain causes. And while I say all this is all being done from behind a computer, and it's not very interesting to watch. But I guess in a world where everyone's just staring at their computers anyway, or their screens anyway, I guess that's all that really matters.
I think the secret to that would be telling the story through those impacted, as opposed to the one impacting. That they would be almost a minor character in their own story. So you have the person they're helping, or the charitable or whoever, and each issue or episode would follow that person. So it'd be almost like an anthology story.
Oh, I really like that. All the different ways that social media has hurt or hindered somebody, and how you can then also inversely use it for good once the social media bandit has gotten involved. Okay. What else you got?
Well, again, I don't know how many of these have been done by independent comics, but I always wanted to do a story and this I came up with the idea when I was right out of college and having trouble finding a job, about a guy who's right out of college and has trouble finding a job and becomes a henchman.
Oh, okay.
So you've got this college educated guy who basically becomes, who are the guys who follow the Joker? Or who are the guys who follow, these horrible people? Most of them you would think, oh, career criminal. Well, what if it's just a 26-year-old, 23-year-old kid right out of college who he can either take the internship for no money, or he can go work for the Joker?
So his secret identity is being the henchman.
Yes. So he, and then how do you live with like the guilt of what the guy's doing? How do you move up in the world of henching? Do you start with a minor criminal and move your way up?
Give him some job titles. That's awesome.
Yeah, and originally started, I actually filled out a resume as if I was a henchman. I was just practicing my resume writing. But yeah, just we follow this guy. He has no powers. It could be he or she, no powers, very unassuming, 5'10", 140 pounds, not an athlete, had never shot a gun before. And suddenly they are, driving the getaway car or the getaway plane, or they're wearing the clown mask as you raid the bank. So yeah, it's about navigating. It would be, again, a lot of it would be navigating the modern work. Do you go work for Lex Luthor because he offers a 401k?
That's true.
So it could be a wry social commentary where at the same time, just kind of a fun look at how villain organizations work.
Well, yeah, the internal politics, what you have to do to move up. I can see it now. Are you hench 1 and then you get promoted to hench 2? Okay, I'm trying to think off the top of my head. Physical exertion specialist number 1, or
do you get to be as the department head of demolitions? I mean, do you go from demolitions department to getaway to transportation? Is he looked down upon because he's college educated?
Yeah.
Or,
torture services.
Do you take one of the other henchmen home to meet your family on the weekend because they're like, who are your friend at work? Their mom, dad, this is Crusher.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. Yeah, and what would a job description read, and how would you find it? Would it be like on topsecretjobs.com, or
do you stumble upon on the dark web? Does someone jokingly put it out on Twitter and you like, oh, I'm going to apply work with I'm really working for the Joker, or, whoever.
Well, and then you look into things like, what are your benefits, and are you overpaid, and do you have a boss that actually values you? And wouldn't it be funny if the top honcho really values his employees and he treats them extremely well, and that's why they stick around?
Yeah, except for the ones he kills when they fail him, that kind of thing.
But I mean, clearly the culture will be like, you deserved that.
Yeah. So, and then, at one point you have to decide, does he descend into evil? Does he, he or she remain pure of heart, but working in a bad industry? Do they try to then later become a sidekick? The whole.
Interesting. There is a book that I read called Hench, that a girl is an executive assistant to villains. And what she ends up doing is, it doesn't go into like the full industry. It's mostly administrative, if I remember correctly. And she changes job opportunities to work for a particularly evil villain. And it was really interesting because I think she learns manipulative behavior from him to then rise into her own villainy, if I remember correctly. But like all it's like the anti-hero story. I guess it's the villain story where she was perfectly normal. It's almost like Catwoman from the 90s, where she was kind of quiet and then something devastating happened to her and she got injured and then changed her whole mindset. It was like that. So I need to look that up so I can recommend it. That was a really good book. All right. Anything else?
Yeah. I guess again, I come from a media background. So I always think of what would the media be like, and would it become oversaturated with superheroes, much like our entertainment industry is now?
Yeah.
And I think you would have a show like, for lack of a word, Capes, which would be their version of Cops, except you follow the superhero. I think you would have a new, like an Entertainment Weekly or an Entertainment Tonight, but it'd be Heroes Tonight.
I love the title Capes. instead of cops. That's hilarious.
So I think you would have like, I'm Mary Hart. Where was Spider-Man today? Where was Dr. Evil? That kind of thing. Oh, did you notice that Superman has a new costume? Is that a darker shade of red? And I think it would extend to YouTube and things like that, where you would have tier lists of superheroes. You would have first time reaction videos to seeing Mega Man fly across the sky. I think you would have the other thing I think you would have a collector's market. And I do have a story I want to write where basically someone buys a pen light that Batman had in his mouth, and of course they want the DNA off it. But I think you would have this. This is a rock that fell off the Empire State Building when the Hulk hit it, and it would be there'd be an eBay for superheroes. There would be a collector's market. There would be forgeries. I think we would become inundated with shows. There would probably be a superhero network where you would have breakdowns of the heroes, much like we do with sports, much like we do, would there be an award show?
People are always critiquing you every move. Could you have done that takedown a little bit better?
And then of course it would be politicized in the modern thing. So you would, if they found out a superhero was liberal or conservative, would a conservative hero be canceled by the left? Or would, Fox News only embrace certain superheroes? Like, oh, well, we like Captain America. Wait, Captain America just spoke out for George Floyd. He's canceled by the right, and now he's the liberal champ. So I think you would have this whole very weird thing where it used to be like either you support the vigilante or you don't. But now I could literally see like half of America likes Spider-Man, but half doesn't. Just depending on what he did or who he said, or there would be probably whispers of this. Does Batman fight too many villains of color? There would be all kinds of even down to like breaking down, like, did you notice the shape of his boot looks not unlike the boots worn by, that kind of thing. So I think we would have this whole sub economy of superherodom, and if it was modern and now.
If you were a superhero in that environment, would you find yourself cashing into a lot of opportunities, whether it's like Spider-Man selling pictures of himself or running your own YouTube channel?
I think you would have to. Yeah, unless I'm already a billionaire. But if if tomorrow I got powers, I think I'd have to do endorsements. I think you'd have to try to for lack of a word, market yourself.
How do you think the police will feel with all these vigilantes running around?
I think it would depend on what community you're in. The interesting thing would be, and again, I don't know, would conservatives like vigilantes because they're hard on crime, or would they not like them because they're taking away power from traditional law enforcement? And I don't know, but I think it would come down to that. I think you would either see vigilantes in more conservative cities and not in more liberal, or vice versa, and I don't know. I really don't know. My initial feeling would be I could see conservative America liking vigilantes, where they might not like more like earth-saving superheroes, because that's taken away. Yeah. Like Captain the Avengers, I think conservative media would not like the Avengers, but would like Batman.
Okay.
Because again, Batman's beating up street punks. Well, maybe the aliens are our friends, or maybe Thanos is getting rid of half of them. Maybe he's only getting rid of half of the bad people. And I don't know. Again,
it's political.
I think it would come down to who says what. Is Tony Stark perceived as Elon Musk, who the conservatives seem to like this week, or is he seen as Bill Gates, who they don't trust?
Okay.
Iron Man's putting, he's putting chips into us all. They fall from the sky, or Iron Man's going to buy Twitter and save. So I don't know, but again, I think you could say one wrong thing, and the whole thing would flip on you.
I think we have time for one more idea if you have it. before I move on to the next question?
I think I'm done.
Okay.
I think that's it. And I probably said too much, and now they're all going to get stolen.
Don't worry about it. I know I was thinking that too, where I'm like, am I going to give too many ideas away? But I'm also like, I'm not going to write those right now. So, and I've always wanted to do a challenge. If it didn't take so much time, where you can give the same prompt to two writers and they can write it out completely differently and have a completely different feel. So I was like, okay, I don't mind sharing my ideas.
And that is the beauty of comic books. We see a lot of that. Where again, you can take a story that was written 20 years ago, rewrite it from another perspective, and it's brand new again. So
yeah,
when you have 70 years of history of, or whatever it is, 80 now of Batman.
Do you think we still need to push out Batman movies?
Yes, because they haven't been done right.
I
Close,
agree,
but not quite.
Okay,
the first two Bale movies were close.
I enjoy his. Yeah, I thought I was able to. Okay, I really liked Robert Pattinson in the latest Batman. I thought he did fantastic. I loved everyone in their roles, but I felt like I was seeing the same plot lines over and over, like, you know, the Falcone and someone else, like the corruption within the police and the authority. And I was like, I feel like we did this already. And so I lost interest. And I thought Penguin, what was your thoughts on how they treated the Penguin character?
I actually really liked it. It's very similar to the comic books.
Okay.
Or not the comic books, the video games. I really liked him. I liked the way the movie looked. I liked how it was filmed. I just thought it was A, too long, and B, a lot of it was, we're going to take the story, we're going to twist it like 15 degrees and try to retell it, as opposed to, I want a 90 degree.
Yeah.
I
want something so wacky and weird. Like, I'm sure in the years of comics that they've, like, there's something we haven't done again.
Oh, there's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot.
Okay. So do you think the world needs superheroes in real life as far as the classical sense of the superhero?
No. And again, because I don't think there's you could remain pure to what you need to be a superhero.
The idea of superhero is something we put on a pedestal. It's not really achievable.
Because I think the way our world is now, and I don't even know if that was 20 years ago, because it would get politicized. It would get tarnished. It would get, you know, let's say you're a superhero who's, you know, burning down the sugar plant. Well, the sugar lobby is going to blackmail them, or they're going to tarnish that image. So we would never get a pure version of it anyways. But then whoever is on the wrong side of the wrong person, you know, Biden endorses the superhero, half the country's going to hate him. Trump endorses the superhero, half the country's going to hate him. So it could never work in today's climate.
Okay. Well, thank you, Brad, for joining me again. You're always a joy to have on the podcast. Do you have any last words?
Nope. Just thanks for letting me geek out for superheroes for like 40 minutes.
Speculative Sandbox is a volunteer-run podcast that relies on the collaboration of fellow creators like you. Join the conversation and participate in fun polls and questionnaires on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. Interested in being in a future episode? Our DMs are open, or you can email speculativesandbox@gmail.com.